What's up everyone, Adrian here, and in this video I want to talk about composition, particularly breaking down my thought process and what tools and techniques that I use to help drive a story and just get the clear-cut message across. And I'll be reviewing some of the photos that I took while chasing cherry blossoms in Japan for a couple weeks. So some of the work that I'm going to show you is going to showcase both street photography as well as landscapes, and so you're going to get a little bit mix of both between both worlds. Now on that same thread, we're not going to be diving deep and heavy into the gear itself or the settings or even the post-processing. Rather, we're just going to look at the image holistically, and so that way you just have a flavor and taste of just what goes on in like my head as I'm just out there in the field, so that way you can become a much more effective shooter if you want to go ahead and implement this thought process or these tools and techniques as well into your own workflow. Now this is also to say that with all the images that I have, there has been some extensive editing done to them, which this video was not going to get into the masking or the editing portion of it. They're going to be their own separate things. If you do want to see more editing videos, particularly breaking down like a certain style of photography or kind of image or just like way I go about things, just let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to make a video like that too, and I already have a couple in the backlog that I'm planning on producing later on during this summer. So with that in mind, before we hop right into the images themselves, definitely stick around toward the end because I have a really exciting announcement relating to my work as well as the images that you're going to see in the video. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and hop right into Lightroom and start breaking down these photos. Alrighty, we have the glasses on, we're in Lightroom, so you know things are about to get serious right over here. So starting off with this picture, this is taken in Sakuragaokacho, which is located in Shibuya, Tokyo. Now this is one of the first cherry blossom spots that I hit when I visited Japan, or just the day after I landed in Japan. And so there's a lot going on within this scene, and at first I didn't really vibe with the scene all too much. I tried to work some things out, and just the more I started to edit this photo and just figure out different compositions as well as supporting actors and how they all build the image holistically, it really grew on me a lot. So I'll go ahead and just break it down. And when it comes to where I was at this time, I was standing on top of a bridge, and I have, yes, the 24-70 because I wanted something really versatile in case there was a lot of different scenes going on, and in this scene was definitely bustling. So looking at this, I kind of split the composition within like a kind of like half light, half dark. And to best illustrate that, when I hit R over here in Lightroom, and as the image is loading, I already have it set to this kind of crop. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with like the different crops within Lightroom, if you go ahead and hit O on your keyboard, you have different crops that you can go ahead and select from, so that way you can go ahead and find your composition. So a common one that I use within my work is a rule of thirds because it's a very simple way of composing things and it's very effective. However, there are times where I feel like sometimes a rule of thirds isn't going to be the best tool to help me identify like with my eye like what it is I want to convey. So just cycling through the different crops, I ultimately landed on this 4-square one. And as we can see over here, we have a light portion at the top, and then we have a darker portion on the bottom over here. So there's this split and interplay between light and dark. Naturally, the viewer's eyes, we tend to gravitate towards what's in the center of the frame or what is going on in the lighter part of the lighter parts of the frame itself here. So looking at this, as you can see, the context is that there's cherry blossoms, but however, there's other things going on which, in a way, not every element within the scene is demanding and taking attention away from each other. Rather, I think they also go ahead and support each other, so let's just go ahead and break it down. So, context, yes, we have the cherry blossoms over here, we can tell it's springtime, and then we have leading lines over here from the middle of the frame, and as you can see, there's a lot of empty negative space over here, and that allows the composition to breathe a little bit more and also just draw our eyes to the other part or like the story of the frame itself, and this being these 4 individuals doing this crosswalk over here. And I will say, like, I got really lucky with this composition because I didn't expect each individual to just align perfectly with each rectangular square on the crosswalk. And when I took this, I was like, no way, did I actually really take this? Because it really reminded me of like the Beatles, and they're doing their infamous like 4-person walk across the crosswalk. I was like, man, I got really lucky with this. So that's why it really grew on me a lot when I just started to play with it and just have a little bit more fun in editing. But yes, we have leading lines as well as negative space to go ahead and allow the composition to breathe more and just have every other component of the frame just take its own shine in a sense. I say that because, yes, while we have the 4 individuals and having like a repeating pattern over here, as flattering as that is, it also helps convey a sense of movement because we have people in mid-gate just walking across the street. Additionally, because these 4 individuals are within the darker portion of the frame, it's not like they're demanding a lot of attention too, and because there's also other individuals on the side of the left third as well as the right third of the frame. Because they are all wearing black for the most part and they are in the darker shadows, they aren't demanding a lot of attention from the frame itself too. However, they do act as more like supporting actors in a way, so that way it helps build this idea and this story of a bustling city. When I say supporting actors too, let's also take a look in the middle part of the frame over here. We have this girl, which is a photographer. She was definitely cooking up something really cool and just finding her compositions. And we also have another group of photographers over here, a couple just taking a portrait session within the light. Naturally, when the latter portions are shown within the frame, our eyes are tend to be drawn towards it. But because these 2 individuals are just really small compared to everyone else, they're not taking up a lot of attention themselves too. So when I see this image, I do think of like a bustling cityscape, but at the same time, you can pick out so many different parts of the image and just break it down and just see each one as its own individual story, kind of like an I Spy book in a way, which is something that I've really just grown to appreciate as well as just really like as I have been developing this photo too. Moving on to the next one, we have the same area, Sakuragaokacho in Shibuya. However, we have a much more distinct individual, and that being this lady in the bottom left third over here running around. Now, when it comes to how I compose this, I had to wait a little bit and just scan out what the area looked like, which I would recommend you guys do if you're in a location for the first time that's just very unfamiliar. Just instead of taking your camera out and just having the tendency to go shoot things that just look really cool or appealing, just take the time to scan out what the area looks like. This is a very important skill and just habit to build into your workflow. And I say that because when you have the patience for something, you can start to study things with more intention. You start to build a little bit more of vision and just seeing like how things and different personas play and interact within the scene itself. And then now you can start to anticipate and have that foresight of like, if this persona, maybe this lady doing some errands or running around, she's going to eventually cross within this light path, and now I can go ahead and have a higher likelihood of getting the shot that I want, versus just shooting with less intention and not having that kind of patience. So, very important thing to do when you're just out there in the field. Going back to the composition itself, very similar to how I had it in the first image, kind of a 50-50 split. So we have Sakura's in the top half, very light portion in the top half of the frame, and then we have a very dark portion over here, so we have this nice 50-50 balance going on within the composition. However, what helps our individual draw more attention and really demand more attention too is how she's running through the light source itself. Couple things here as we're studying the bottom half of the frame. When it comes to people running, I would highly suggest using a burst mode within your camera. I use a Canon R6 Mark II in this scenario, so I just waited for the right opportunity to have her run through, shooting in bursts, so that way I have a higher likelihood of just her running mid-gate, because that helps convey a sense of movement. What also helps convey a sense of movement too is using both negative space as well as leading lines. So unlike the first example over here, we do have this negative space in the bottom right hand corner, but it's used in a different context because that helps eliminate distractions and allows us to focus on our subject running in this light patch. Additionally, because we have the leading lines from the road heading up to the right hand corner of the frame, it helps convey a sense of how much further she needs to go, but also in a sense a scale of the image, because now like you can think of this long winding road. You can't see it in this image in particular because it is just a subsection of the whole road itself, but I definitely recommend heading to Sakuragaokacho for the views and the vibes. But going back to the composition here, the thing that is really important, what I would want you guys to take note of, especially in street photography, is A person's shadow. If your subject is going to be a human being, take note of your shadow as well as how it's interacting with the rest of the shadows too. Because chances are, if I did not wait for this lady or was not at the right place at the right time, her shadow would probably be like enveloped by the other shadows from the vending machine as well as a tree in the sign, and in a way it loses a subject. While I do have her have light hitting on her black jacket on the left hand side, that helps her pop out, but if I have the shadow as distinct as possible, that can help create a much stronger focal point within the image itself. So very important tip, be mindful of shadows and just be mindful of like how the shadows are moving within the frame too and how they're interacting with each other. It took me a little bit to get to develop that kind of eye, but again, like when you have that patience, that vision, and that foresight, now you can kind of see how things play out within the scene itself. Let's go ahead and move along. Alright, this is one of my favorite photos for a couple different reasons. This is over in Nonbei, Yokocho in Shibuya, Tokyo, at nighttime. And if you're not familiar with the scene, it is a area where there's a lot of izakayas, pubs, and just places to eat too. It's a very tourist-heavy destination. It's because it's very aesthetic, and I would say it's an Instagrammable spot as well. But outside of that, really cool place to be. And in this scene over here, it reminded me of a couple different things. Particularly Midnight Diner from Netflix. Just having individuals come to this space, eat. It's like a slice of life in a way, which is what I was kind of going for. But I wanted to convey a sense of mystery, not only with how I framed it, but just with the shot selection itself and just the setting. So I did underexpose it so I can go ahead and save the highlights. And that way I can really crush the blacks and just focus on what is important. Getting into this image in more detail, I have cropped this in a 16:9 frame. I love 16:9 frames because it just looks something like straight out of a movie. And you can see, and I bring this up in this context of both photography and videography, when you're trying to develop that eye for composition as well as just if you're investing in more time in a video and developing that skill, I would recommend shooting your photos more in 16:9 because now you have this, what we call an establishing shot. That way it helps build the story, world building, and you can understand the more context in detail. And then you can start to focus and crop in on certain parts within the composition through like 4:5 crops or just however you want to crop it. So that way we can focus on the smaller details and just on the individuals or actions that come May. So other than the 16:9 frame, we have a couple other things to help ground this image itself too. You can't see anyone's face, so it develops a sort of mystery, which is also, I would say, if to become a stronger street photographer, not revealing details creates a sense of interest, intrigue, raises a lot of questions, and because I have no one's face showing, you can only pick out certain things based on like what they're wearing or what's going on within the frame itself too. Additionally, we have some color contrasts or complementary colors, that being the orange shadows as well as the warm, inviting mid-tones and highlights. So it kind of entices you to like be part of the scene itself. And then we have what I love over here, patterns, and especially pattern breaks. Now, as for patterns, we have these red chairs lined up, and because the red pops out really aggressively within this frame, it draws your eyes and also kind of like lures you in. But at the same time, because they are all very uniform, it creates this really nice flattering pattern effect. On the flip side of the same coin, we have two individuals over here breaking up that pattern, and we're creating negative space because of that too. So on the right hand side of what seems to be a salaryman, as well as on the left hand side of what seems to be the salaryman's buddy, we have a lot of negative space for the image to breathe and not feel as busy and create the sense of like privacy and privacy between different parties. Speaking of privacy, we have a party on the left hand side and you can't see their faces whatsoever, and to me this kind of looks like a date scenario or a rendezvous or kind of like a secretive meetup. You can tell there's at least two people, by the way that this body is positioned, kind of like towards the corner, as well as just like the amount of beer there is. So breaking down this scene even further, crush the blacks itself so that way we can get this really nice contrasty dramatic effect, a little bit on the moodier side. But overall, I would say what I want to drive home with this image: shoot in 16:9, establish your shot, and then that will help set up your composition for different compositions and focus on the finer details, which I'll go ahead and show you momentarily. So going into kind of like the next phase of this photo over here, it's the same photo with Salaryman A and Homie B, and this time we just have 3 individuals with the server in the back of the bar just doing his own thing. Now, very much the same thing, but now we have removed quite a lot by going with a 4:5 crop, and we have a much more intimate scene going on, which, while we don't have the other supporting actors to help build the scene, now we can just focus on like what is going on within this particular frame over here. We still have negative space when it comes to the empty seats themselves, but because we also have this contrast and interplay between a top third of the frame being dark as well as basically the bottom third of the frame being dark, we can just focus our eyes on really the warmer parts as well as just the brighter parts of the image itself, and just come to study and also raise questions about what is going on and what is like happening with it in the scene too. Moving along to the flip side of the image as well, conversely, this is the same image too, but chopped up so that way I'm revealing basically the left third of the frame itself, and now we're still focusing on more of the finer details of the image, but because we have the same elements used in a different context, we have still, yet again, a sense of mystery because we can't see anyone's face. We have 2 empty seats, so you don't even know how many people are over here on the right-hand side of the frame, except for this one person. It could be bustling, it could be just in the beginning stages of the restaurant opening. But because now we're minimizing the amount of information that's there, we're relying heavily on what we can just see in front of us, and part of that is still, again, this use of negative space, this use of like privacy between different parties as the scene is playing out. So in a way, you can't really help but feel like you want to be part of the scene too because of how alluring these red chairs are. So we have the pattern breaks with the 2 fans, the 2 chairs. There's a lot of 2s going on within this frame itself. The other 2s that I can see here, 2 glasses of beer, we got 2 individuals, and we have 2 individuals on the right hand side of the frame. So there's a lot of things going on, but the more that you just study and look into this image, and it's difficult to do it in the heat of the moment, you can start to begin and to break down what is going on as the story is progressing. But yes, what I want to drive home with these 3 sets of images is that you have, again, your establishing shot to go ahead and build that world setting, and then you have 2 other smaller compositions within that bigger frame itself to help focus in on the finer details, and then draw more attention to certain parts of the frame where you want the viewer to study on. Moving along to the next photo, what we have is an Obachan, or a grandma over here, just walking up. This is in Mukojima, or by the Sumida River in Tokyo. And the thing is, we have her just walking up these stairs, and then we have her basically in contrast to these cherry blossoms over here. Now, there's a couple things that went on within this scene. Luckily, I had this patch of light over here. I would say, when in street photography, if you can go ahead and find your light source, especially if you have a human subject or an element that you want to go ahead and highlight, if they pass through that patch of light, or they're highlighted by that light that's hitting on them, that can help them stand out within a busy scene itself. I also use a couple other editing techniques too, such as masking to go ahead and darken certain parts of the image, particularly the bottom third, as well as the background. That also helps me create not only contrast, but a sense of depth as well too. This depth can also be further emphasized by how we have steps leading up, and how the grandma is also walking in mid-stride too, to help convey a sense of movement, kind of like what we saw in the earlier images too. But particularly with this image, I want to drive home the sense of scale, and you can use scale to highlight how both big things are and how small things are. And because we're using this sakura tree to fill in the frame, That helps convey a sense of just how large or grand something is in contrast to our human subject. And I would say like we humans, we kind of just like know our heights, even if like we're not there in person, we can kind of gauge it. I would say like she's like 5'4", just, you know, just a really small lady, strong and powerful, but strong and powerful in contrast to this big and powerful tree over here. So you can use two things to highlight each other as well as just display what their qualities are relative to each other too. So we have a good mix between light and dark, interplay between this little like light box over here, the shadows going on in the frame, as well as the large sakura tree in relation to this small grandma over here. So very simple, effective storytelling frame over here. Again, I feel like this is something like straight out of an anime. Moving along to the next image over here. Alright, speaking of anime, as you can tell, there are a lot of things that help influence my work, that being television, media, as well as just I love watching a lot of anime too, because I find a lot of not only A-roll kind of scenes, but also like B-roll kind of scenes to help build the story. Speaking of building the story, this is shot at Hinokicho Park, which is in Roppongi. And at this time, I was using the 70-200 lens because I really wanted to get more of those compression shots. And in this image, very similarly to how the image with the grandma was in the last image, we have basically 2/3 of our frame being filled in by the cherry blossoms, and that's where I hit my focal point. Ideally, I really waited for this lady to just walk along this path, so that way I can just have a human element within my subject, but she turned around as I was taking the photo, and at first I was like, oh no, I really hope my focus didn't hit the lady, so that way like I can just focus on the cherry blossoms, which leads into one of my other points. Your human subject doesn't always have to be the main subject in focus. Rather, by having your human subject blurred out, it can help build the scene and tell a story better. I say this in particular because with how this lady is looking, you can't tell if she's sad or if that's her resting face or just what she's thinking. And because she's turned back, something has caught her attention or something has just triggered her to turn back. So it still raises a lot of questions within this frame itself too, and creates a lot of interest. I would say because of her seemingly not displeased, but like just maybe resting expression, you can't tell if she's happy or not in relation to like something associated with happiness and youth and just like a really nice day like these cherry blossoms. There's contrast in play here. So a little bit of a subtle technique and something that if you have a trained eye and also the foresight for it, you can definitely see that within the world itself too. Other than filling the frame with the cherry blossoms, we have a couple other things going on to a really simple color scheme. So we have these nice pinkish, whitish cherry blossoms. We have these desaturated greens over here. Kind of creates a little bit of a moodier image, and I did add some grain because I think that's a really nice stylized effect too, and I love grain. Just looks like a memory that you can look back on, something nostalgic in a sense too. But yeah, other than that, similarly to how I had the other compositions before in the video, having this pathway void of people, it kind of shows either how much she came across, how much she walked, or how much further she needs to go. So it also helps create a vague sense of movement in that respect too. But yes, one of my, in a way, unintentional but yet intentional favorite images that I was able to get, and I was really lucky for this one. So moving along. Hinokicho Park again. This time, this is on one of those really famous Instagrammable streets, and I was shooting on top of a bridge itself too. And this image is one of my all-time favorites for a couple different reasons, because I did not expect to get a salaryman biking through this road just coming out of the cherry blossoms, and when I saw this I was like, damn, like I was really happy with this. But to break down this image, I did not crop this in the 4x5 frame, rather I did not crop this in the 4x5 frame, rather I have this as shot. So what I want to drive home with this is that not every image has to be for Instagram or for social media. You can just have this for a print, for your enjoyment, whatever it may be. But I I had this not cropped all the way because I want to show a much grander sense of movement within the frame itself with the use of negative space over here. It's a little bit hard to see until you have developed an eye for this, but we also have basically a split composition from the top left corner to the bottom right corner over here. I say that because if I were to draw an imaginary line from top to bottom, half my frame is negative space and then half my frame is filled in by the cherry blossoms over here. This one I got really lucky with at the time, and I got a good spot while I was on the bridge just shooting different subjects, particularly mainly cars, but when this Salaryman came through, I just got really lucky. But yes, you can create depth through not only movement, negative space, but also just field of depth of field. And this one, I think I shot it like f4 or something, but because some cherry blossoms were in focus, some were out of focus, that also helps create a illusion of depth within a 2D image itself. A couple other things that we have going on to help us convey a sense of movement and depth are these leading lines from the road itself, from the paintings, as well as the gutter over here. And then we have our Salaryman mid-stride as he's just biking through. Just a really strong image overall, and to help further emphasize the simplicity of the image too, for as busy as it can be, you can break it down into colors. So we have pinkish white petals over here dominating the top third triangle of the frame, and then for the rest of the composition it's just greens and reds. So I'm basically working with 3 different colors, with the exception of black here and there on the Salaryman on the bike, but otherwise, like, there is less visual information color-wise to help us pick out what is important within the frame too, while also helping other things stand out as well. So moving along, we have another Salaryman biking through the cherry blossoms, and this time this is in Nagoya, heading towards Nagoya Castle. So one morning I ate at a fish market and I wanted to take the scenic route, which is like an hour-long walk from the fish market to Nagoya Castle. And I got stopped at this street for a couple different reasons, because there were a lot of cherry blossoms hanging overhead, so I just decided to wait, see what kind of compositions passed me by, and I got really lucky with this one too. This one was shot in a burst mode setting. I was using the 24 to 70mm lens at the time because I want to have a lot of versatility. And what helps ground this image is an interplay between light as well as dark too. More so with the highlights, because, and this is a very important thing to do, whether you're out in street photography or you're in landscapes, your highlights can help you minimize the amount of distractions. I say that because when there's clouds, maybe like streams of clouds from like a jet stream or whatever it may be, or just other elements within the frame itself, by blowing out the highlights, you can help simplify your image by just erasing what is there. Having blown out highlights is not always a bad thing. While usually our eyes are drawn to the latter portions of the frame, we can still use different elements and techniques within the frame itself to help focus in on our focal point, this being the Salaryman over here. And like what I talked about in my other images prior, waiting for the shadow to cross and be framed in between the different shadows of the surrounding structures as well as green, it helps create a stronger image and helps your subject stand out even further, in addition to the light hitting the left hand side of the frame itself too, or the left hand side of the Salaryman itself. So this right here is a strong image for a couple different reasons. Blown out highlights erase a lot of unnecessary detail. You have this strong interplay and balance between blown out highlights, but also deep dark shadows as well as blacks over here, which we will then help use to help frame our cycling Salaryman under the cherry blossoms and make him a much more distinct and powerful figure. And then we also have leading lines throughout the image too, such as from this bridge over here. We have the leading lines from the sidewalk and the grass, and then we have leading lines from this wall structure. So they're all converging to a point of like a vanishing point is what I'm trying to say. And then kind of just top things off, there was some masking included as well, such as the linear gradients to help focus and darken certain areas that just don't add towards the image holistically. So again, strong image. A lot of these tools and techniques I am able to apply throughout different disciplines of photography, just use them slightly in different ways to help convey like what the story or what the image is trying to convey. Alright, Last couple of images that we have up here. This one is of Fuji as well as the cherry blossoms. Now, referring back to my earlier point about having patience, foresight, and vision, this was really important because we had this nice interplay between light and shadows, and I had to wait for the swaying of the branches to line up perfectly with Fuji itself, while also waiting for the light to hit certain parts of the petals itself to go ahead and have them stand out a little bit more. And earlier to my point about not having your human subject be your main subject in focus, similarly to here, Fuji is already demanding a lot of attention because it's basically split in half with the frame, but at the same time it is such a grand natural feature that is not only really impressive, but also it can help become more of a supporting actor for some of the finer details while you're out there. So this is in Kogamasa Memorial Park at Lake Kawaguchi, and standing on this side of the park, you can see Fuji directly ahead, and there's a lot of sakura just swaying back and forth, but to help drive my point home about how important it is to have patience, let me show you the next photo. Now, this is the photo over here where by kind of taking burst shots as well as not having the patience, there is a lot more shadow and dark interplay. And while the petals over here in the center of the frame do demand attention, it's just not to the effect of the earlier photo that I have, where there's this nice repeating pattern between light and dark in the middle of the frame going on. So in a way, having more shadows actually takes away from the center portion of the frame and kind of like leads the viewer's eyes to see like where it is that I need to focus on or pay attention to. But otherwise, very similar to the last photo, we have leading lines from the branches, repeating patterns, and then we have Fuji in the background too, creating this nice leading converging line to the center of the frame itself. So that way, the viewer's eyes can just look directly ahead and not be too confused about like where it is that they need to spend their time at. All right, last but not least, let's get into the last photo. It is of Fuji again, however we have a couple different things going on too. Again, repeating patterns interplay between light and dark shadows. We have leading lines that cascade down from the top portion of the frame that lead to Fuji itself within focus. Additionally, because Fuji is in focus, I made that my focal point. There is a lot more attention demanded, even though that the sakuras themselves occupy 2/3 of the frame itself. With Fuji being as grand as it is and in focus as it is, and also not obstructed by these different clouds, and we can make out its texture and outline, that's where it can demand a little bit more attention, thus supported by the supporting actors, such as these leaves and patterns going on. And speaking of leaves and patterns going on, you can also think about this composition in a couple different ways. Because of how simple things are, once you have that trained eye, you can just see, again, repeating patterns, leading lines, and then they're all converging to the bottom third of the frame. Fuji, being snow-capped and beautiful as it is, it's a color break between everything else, thus making this stand out even more on the bottom third of the frame itself. So, that is a lot to digest within this half hour that I've been with you guys. Hope you guys learned something new along the way. And if you did learn something new, just let me know what technique that, just stood out to you as you were watching the video. Additionally, kind of referring back to earlier in the video about like this really exciting announcement that I will be creating a preset pack for not only these images, but for a collection of other images that I have shot throughout my many years doing photography. So it's going to encompass both landscape as well as street. I will advertise more of that information through my Instagram handles, as well as I will be selling them on my Squarespace website when that is live. So yeah, more information on both Yokuya Adrian as well as Kuya_Adrian, but more so on Kuya_Adrian, since that is the main photography account there too. Otherwise, some other things to look forward to, masking and editing, that's their own separate videos. I will be breaking down some of the more of these images that I feel like are going to be very valuable to learn from, and I will also sell some of my prints related to these images over here through my darkroom. So more information on that later on. But yeah, with that in mind, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did like the comment, go ahead and drop a like so that way I know that this is valuable for you guys and this is worth making. And if you do like and want to continue to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe. That will help me out tremendously. So appreciate you guys learning along the way, growing together and developing our skills and just being out there. So with all that in mind, hope to see you guys in the next video, and I'll catch you guys around. Until then, peace out, my friends.